All right, hello, welcome everyone to Star Trek from the Holodeck. This is the Strange New Worlds edition. And for all of you new listeners out there, welcome. Be sure to find us wherever you listen to your podcasts and search From the Holodeck. Leave us a review, give us a thumbs up, and also a 5-star rating if you're an Apple Podcast listener. Please, we need it. Hello, David. How are you?
Hello, everybody.
Okay, so Dave, we have a very fun episode to discuss. I am very happy with this finale. A little conflicted overall with the season.
Yeah.
Not that the season was bad, nowhere near bad. But there was a lot of roller coasters. Roller coastering, ups and downs, and I also feel like there's a smorgasbord of genres thrown into a season. They were playing a lot in different sandboxes, and whether or not that will go over well historically, like as the years go by, will remain to be seen. It didn't quite work for me overall, but we'll get into that. I do feel like, David, before we move on though, and tell me if you disagree or agree, I do feel like Star Trek Strange New World would benefit from sticking to a specific sandbox for most of a season. That doesn't mean you can't have a couple one-offs that feel a little different, but overall, in order for your show to feel tight and consistent, you probably should maintain a similar motif throughout.
And when you're talking about sandbox, you're talking about the genre they choose to play in.
Right.
Like this particular season, they went from horror films to almost mockumentary type stuff, and I think you're right. I think after this one, while I enjoyed Strange New Worlds, this particular season compared to last season, the jarringness of this entire season when it comes to the vibe or the feel that you get is a little off-putting. Where it's like you have like some of these really cool episodes and then you follow it up with a different vibe and it kind of stops your momentum.
Yeah.
And I get it. I mean, originally I was all for this because I want Star Trek to be able to flourish and actually show that it can be multiple things.
Yeah.
Stop the trolls by saying no, Star Trek has to be like this. No. Star Trek can be anything.
Yeah, and I don't even think their strategy is wrong necessarily or off, but it probably would work better with more episodes.
Yes.
I feel like when having such a small episode count and you fluctuate so drastically from genre to genre in a single season, it feels a little disconnected, and that is strange to say. It might sound like I'm being negative about the season. I'm not. I'm just being critical. I am being a critic, and I'm discussing certain issues and problems that might be there.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that this season, this is the paradox here, David. This season has better episodes in this season than last season. But I think possibly the second season might be overall better. Does that make any type of sense whatsoever? Do you get what I'm saying? I think that the quality of the writing overall was probably better within the first two seasons so far. But the third season has some amazing episodes that might even be better than some of the episodes in the first two seasons.
I agree with you actually in that regard, because this particular season, there was a lot of individual praise I noticed on certain writers and certain producers, specifically Davy Perez.
Yeah.
I mean, he did 3 episodes.
Is that what the total was?
I think. But from what I understand, like the best episodes that even we covered of this season were Davy Perez's episodes. And he gets a lot of actually praise online for what he did this season.
Yeah.
And That's the thing that I'm like going. I walk away from season 3 by saying I had a lot of fun. It was really nice, and I think that comparatively to season 1 and season 2, season 1 and season 2's story overall, their overall arcs are far better than season 3.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that's the contradiction, Dave. And it just needs to be said. I love Star Trek. I think that's very clear. So I don't feel like this season was bad.
No.
It might even go back to what I've been saying or the way I've been describing Star Trek 5. So this season is great Star Trek. Season 3 is great Star Trek. But sometimes great Star Trek does not equate great television. And the same thing could be said about movies. In fact, that's what I say about Star Trek 5. Star Trek 5 is a great piece of Star Trek. It's not a great movie.
At least you agree there. At least you agree with the people there.
Yeah. So, all right, David. So this episode was fantastic.
It was.
It was titled New Life and New Civilizations. And if people are wondering why it felt so down, but also hopefully optimistic, is because this episode was actually originally designed to serve as a series finale. Apparently, there was fear during production that possibly the show would not be renewed for season 4. So they wrote this episode with that in mind. And I would say that if this was the end, I would probably be okay. I would be sad that, like,
Yeah.
what, 3 seasons? Really? What is it, Star Trek Picard? Is this the norm now?
No.
That's not what I want, please. I want more seasons and more episodes. But if this was what we were given, because that's just the nature of television producing and the networks that just don't want to give certain shows a chance to grow, then I would be like, okay, I understand the situation we're in, and ultimately I could be okay with this, with how it ended.
Well, also, that explains why, also, we returned back to the first 2 seasons' main story arc, which was Pike.
Correct. And Destiny.
And those were the strong points of season 1 and season 2.
Mm-hmm.
So in season 3, if this was supposed to be the ending,
it was a good bookend, right?
It was a good bookend looking back at it now, and actually even rewatching it and seeing that Pike's story, if it were to end right here, at least his story in regards to before he gets into that chair,
mm-hmm.
then this actually makes his story a little hopeful when you think about it. Because, and I started thinking about this when I watched the season finale for the second time. The whole point that everyone points out about the cage, how it ends, it's a little downer because Pike is technically still in that chair, but he's stuck on that planet, having to be cared for by those aliens.
Yeah, but yeah, go ahead.
But and a lot of Star Trek fans carried that as partly a tragic ending.
Yeah.
But now when you actually watch this episode and then watch how Pike's story ends, this episode actually helps kind of soften the blow, so to speak.
Yeah, I would agree, because that was one of the beautiful moments about this episode. The fact that Batel, and we're going to get to all the ins and outs. We're not jumping around and forgetting things.
Yeah.
But that's the reason why what Patel did for Pike was just so powerful. The fact that she wanted to give him an experience. And we all know experience, I mean, it goes back, it's very philosophical. You don't have to live an experience to experience a lived experience if it's gifted to you. I know that sounds ridiculous. I don't know any other way to say it. But if you are implanted with memories, those are your memories. And it's very much like the Picard episode where he learns to play the piccolo.
Yes.
I think it's a piccolo.
Yes.
Where Picard, if I remember the episode correctly, there was some type of alien technology that purposely possessed Picard's mind and gave him the life experience of an ancient individual, ancient civilization, a person, or I should say a person that was a part of a now extinct civilization.
Yes.
And even though that was not Picard's life, he felt like it was his. He had a child, he had a wife, he lived countless years as this individual, so it became a part of who he was. And that's exactly what they did here. He may not have physically experienced this, but emotionally and mentally, it is real.
And that's the thing. That's the philosophical point that I love about stories like this, where it makes you question what reality is. You know, where it's kind of like,
what is real?
What is real? If you experience something or if you believe in something just hard enough, and it affects you that closely, then that is real. It may not be real to the outside people, but it's real to you. And I really dug how they handled Pike in this regard in this episode.
Yeah, it's incredibly like metaphysical, because you're dealing with the opposing forces of idealism versus materialism, which is what you're saying. Like, what is real? What is real?
What is real? And then, like, when you see Pike's reaction to everything, it is masterfully done. How this whole, not just this particular season, but also going back to season 1, Pike has always been portrayed as kind of like this stoic figure that knows his destiny and he's going to march right to it. Here, you almost get the sense that he has now some optimism with his stoicism.
Yeah.
Because like he can look back and say, "Hey, I actually lived a really good life."
He was given a lifetime of experience.
Yeah.
That is so awesome. I think that's just a beautiful way. I almost feel like it should have ended
right there.
It's a beautiful way to tie up a story without being morbidly depressing. Now, it was sad, but they did, fade out for 30 seconds.
And then they came back.
Or fade out. They faded out for a few seconds and came back for a few more seconds to give us some hope at the end. And it was a nice little setup for the original series by saying, we have enough information here now, thanks to Corgi. Wait, Corgi? What, is that his name?
Corby.
Corgi's a dog, right?
Corgi's a dog.
Well,
he's
an asshole.
He's an asshole, and he's Chapel's dog.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. So Corby, with the information Corby gave them, they now have enough to explore that would last the equivalent of a 5-year mission. That was great. That was awesome.
That was nice.
Yeah. So I really do like the effort that the writers and the producers put into this episode and giving us a potential send-off.
Well, that's the thing is like
it was very thoughtful.
That's what those last few moments really felt to me like. Was like the show was saying not just goodbye to these characters, but goodbye to the fans that have supported the show, because at the end of the day, we all wanted Strange New Worlds to be that connection for the original series. And, a lot of people wanted it to kind of butt up against the original series and be kind of like this perfect synergy between the past and the current edition of Star Trek. That's why a lot of the things they chose to do in this episode, I thought was really, really smart, really. Like even down to the stuff with Kirk and Spock, where I didn't know they would go there, but having those two mind meld makes a lot of sense. And I really felt that those moments might easily have been seen as Easter eggs, but in actuality, I think the right term that people have been using this particular episode is a love letter to the fans, giving them what we all wanted to see. We wanted to see the beginnings, the seeds of the relationship between Spock and Kirk, because just like what you've been saying throughout this entire season that we've been covering, the characters of Kirk and Spock are kind of like untouchable. You can't mess with them too much.
Yeah.
But what we can do is add a little something to them.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I feel could be added to is like, yeah, show us the beginnings of that relationship. But why is Kirk and Spock best friends from the get-go in the original series?
Yeah.
And it's showing them at this moment, like starting that process and basically having them almost come to, have like come to the meeting of the minds over that. I forget what the name of that game is. The chess, the 3D chess.
Yeah,
game.
3D chess.
And I'm like going, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it was good. I loved everything they did with Kirk and Spock. And David, have you noticed with each passing episode just how well Paul Wesley improves upon his Kirk?
Yes.
This episode was the best Kirk we've gotten yet. Not that I've loved him since the beginning. I thought he's done very well. The first appearance we said is an interesting start. Let's see how he grows into it. And I think this is that. This is him. This moment in this episode was him growing into that role. There were moments where he didn't even need to look like William Shatner for me to believe that he was Kirk. Just his blasé or his seemingly blasé attitude, his happy-go-lucky, swashbuckling mentality, he's capturing it.
Yeah.
And it's really working. And it makes me incredibly anxious because I want more with Paul Wesley. I don't want this to be the end. When Strange New Worlds ends, I don't want it to be the end. This Paul Wesley, why recast? We know we're never going to let Kirk go. It's never going to happen. So please do not recast him again. Just keep Paul Wesley on the back burner if we don't have an immediate show for him, because we need him. He is great, very good. And that's one of the strengths of this episode as well, is just seeing how truly their bond started and knowing now that a mind meld is at the beginning of their bond. It makes a lot of sense.
It does. And I mean, like, also the thing I really like, and I think this is going to be a positive for this era of Star Trek, that I know a lot of fans out there don't want to hear any positives of the current iteration of Star Trek. But one of the positives that they've really have done is really updating and bringing back the legacy characters. The way that I think it's Ethan Peck.
Yeah, Ethan Peck.
The way that they've brought along Ethan Peck as our Spock now.
Yeah, he's great too. Yeah.
He has grown into that role brilliantly, just as much as Paul Wesley is now. And even Uhura and Scotty, the way that they treat these characters, and they let the actors kind of grow into them. They're not just thrust into them. Like, I like the Kelvin movies, but you can definitely tell that a lot of those actors were just thrown in, and they had to fly by the seat of their pants right then and there.
I love the Kelvin movies too, for what they are. If they took place in our timeline, I'd be annoyed. But because it takes place in a separate timeline, I'm just fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like Into Darkness.
Just
as a movie, it didn't. There was a lot of logical inconsistencies and things where you're just like, really, that's what you did. But Star Trek Beyond was great.
Yes,
and the first Star Trek, 2009, the first one that started the whole Kelvin timeline stuff, was fantastic as well. It's missing the philosophical weight of Star Trek, but it has everything else that makes Star Trek, in my opinion. So you are right. Now, Chris Pine does a great Kirk. And I'd even say, for sure, Carl Urban does an amazing DeForest Kelley, or I should say Dr. McCoy. But those are the only two actors that I felt were taking the job serious, in that they wanted to make sure they resemble these characters in some way. Not caricatures, but they wanted to resemble them. Zachary Quinto does a great Vulcan. I don't know if he actually captures Spock quite yet. he's fine and I'm okay with it, but it's not on the level of Ethan Peck.
I think the problem that Zachary Quinto had though was like he had to play opposite Leonard Nimoy because Leonard Nimoy was there.
That's true.
And it's like, well, I can't really play Leonard Nimoy to Leonard Nimoy's face because it would just be condescending at that point.
Yeah.
But like, I definitely agree with you. Is like, the Kelvin actors weren't given enough to actually grow into those characters that they could have.
And to be fair, I mean, does anybody really know who Uhura really is? Do we really know what her characterization is? That is the thing about Uhura and Sulu and Chekhov.
Yeah.
They were a certain type of character in a 1960s TV show, but in the movies, they never fully were the same people they were in the TV show. They were different. And movies are designed in ways that they don't focus necessarily on fleshing out the supporting cast. They're simply supporting. The movies were always about the three. So I feel like casting people for Uhura and Chekhov and perhaps even Sulu is not nearly as important as it is to cast correctly for the top three of the original series. All right, David. So let's get into this episode more formally. So in the season finale of Strange New Worlds, New Life, and New Civilizations, the show grapples with some of Star Trek's oldest questions while also layering in new existential tensions. We see destiny, right?
Yep.
Duality and interdimensional myth-making collide in a story that ties, ultimately, individual character arcs to the franchise's larger philosophical legacy. And at the heart of it all lies this tension between order and chaos, logic and emotion. Yes, I'm going there again because that is exactly what they're doing, as well as freedom and fate. And of course, if people have been listening to our shows, this is what I've been talking about. That's always been in Star Trek. It's a type of Nietzschean balancing act that Trek has long staged in different forms throughout its 60 years, specifically starting with the motion picture. There's an argument to be made that idea wasn't fully fleshed out in the 60s, but it definitely came through specifically in the conflict between V'ger and Spock. The mental conflict.
Yes.
So this is continuing that tradition. Now, let's talk about Pike's destiny, Dave. This is something that's always been uncomfortable for a lot of Star Trek folks.
Oh, absolutely.
Is this idea of destiny, because it does conflict with a lot of these, personal autonomy and freedom. And when you're dealing with humanist philosophy, it doesn't seem sometimes that the idea of destiny, the idea that you can't have true free will, it doesn't always sit well with Star Trek. But I feel like that's not necessarily true. And the way they frame it in this episode is beautiful, because this is exactly how I would explain it in narrative form. So even though, Pike's conversation with Patel frames destiny as a possible constraint, something essentially written in stone,
yes,
but it also opens the door to reinterpret it. Patel's pushback forces Pike to consider that maybe destiny is not prophecy, and this is the beautiful part here, but a kind of responsibility that guides choice.
yes.
And this entire reframing leans into existentialist thinking. What feels like fate may instead be the recognition that we are free to choose and must bear the weight of those choices.
Yeah, because it goes with the idea, and stealing from, comic book lore, with great power comes great responsibility. And essentially that's what Patel's pushback really accounted to when I thought about it, is like the idea that, yes, destiny is a constraining concept that controls all of us is it's kind of foreboding, and
It limits our freedom.
it limits the our
perceived freedom.
There you go, our perceived freedom. But using Batel's philosophy, which is, yeah, it constrains our freedom, but it our destiny is also our responsibility.
Yeah.
We have our choice. Do we want to actually take this? Then we have to accept the consequences of that.
Right.
Because every single choice we make has to have a consequence.
Yeah. You can also look at this from a slightly different perspective, I suppose. There is another existentialist philosopher. I'm sure many people are familiar with him. He's a French philosopher from the mid 20th century, Jean-Paul Sartre. He had this idea of brute force. And I believe, David, you and I have actually talked about this on various shows. We always get into existentialist thought at some point.
Yeah.
But his idea of brute force isn't necessarily about destiny being immovable, but it is connected to the concept of destiny. And the reason why this is so important is because Sartre, as well as existentialists, believe in free will. They believe that we have the power to control what we do, how we do it, and that we create and shape our own meaning. Now, the idea of brute force describes the conditions of existence we cannot change. That has nothing to do with free will. There are very real things, cosmological, material, untangible things that we cannot control. For example, being born in a particular time.
Yes.
Having a certain body. Facing death. These givens confront us like... Let me rephrase that. I feel like when you look at things like that, these things can confront us like an immovable wall, but they're not. These are necessary cosmological phenomenons that we have no control over. That has nothing to do with free will. So if you look at the larger story this season, it's a cosmological story. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
We're dealing with cosmic ideas, cosmic horror, cosmic existentialism. Everything is underneath that theme, or I would probably say motif. So if we're dealing with the cosmic is immovable. So why would this not make sense to someone? Pike's destiny is not a matter of not having freedom. It's an aspect of what Sartre says is brute force.
Brute force.
It's immovable because we can't control certain things. If I was born with the potentiality to get diabetes, that has nothing to do with free will.
Yes.
That's brute force. So you can view Pike's perceived destiny as simply a cosmological function that we can call brute force.
Well, the beautiful thing about that is it ties to Pike in the past seasons. Like, one of the biggest lessons he learns is if you change your destiny, this is what happens. What the I think it was the past season finale, either in season 2.
It's season 1 finale.
Or season 1.
You're talking about where he meets old Pike?
Where he meets old Pike.
Yeah, that's season 1 finale, I believe.
And in that regard, I like the fact that basically, in a way, this ties into that particular season finale where it's like,
yeah,
it's a reminder to Pike that, hey, everything you choose has a consequence. You avert your destiny, fine. Guess what happens? Spock dies.
Yeah.
Do you want that? And obviously, in that particular episode, Pike came to the realization that other people's destinies are more important than his, and he was okay with that.
And the reason why, let's say these other people's destinies are more important, right? Like, is essentially what he was told, if I remember correctly, that some people's history or actions are more important than others. That was kind of the cold water that they poured all over Pike. It was sad. I think we talked about it at depth, during our discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're now looking at his destiny as this immovable brute force, then it's not about destiny. It's about something that must happen because it's cosmological and other lives are connected. So yes, someone might say, well, you're just splitting hairs. This is all semantics. It's still destiny. I'm like, but it's not. It's not. The way they're describing it now, they're reinterpreting it as a form of responsibility that guides choice.
Yes, because Pike still has that choice to avert it. He
Yeah.
has that choice to change his mind.
Exactly. He has the choice not to do it.
Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately what you flash forward to this particular episode. You parallel that with the story of Battelle, who she embraced her destiny because she realized the importance of her destiny, what it means to actually be the beholder. And like
It's very similar to her sacrifice is very similar to what Pike will be doing.
exactly. And like in a way that's partially why she gives Pike that long life. But not on top of that, she gives herself that prize too, because she gets to live that with Pike.
Yeah. David, did you laugh a little bit though? Because this goes right back to what we always talk about, that Star Trek archetype. Every Star Trek series, except perhaps Enterprise, always ends up creating a new super being. Have you noticed that?
Yes.
Now we have another super being, and it's Battelle.
It's Battelle. And it's like that's
In a lot of ways, she's the
beholders.
ultimate. She's the ultimate super being.
Yes. In a lot of ways, the creation of what they did in cosmologically, I have to say, thinking back to it, Battelle is literally one of the most powerful beings in all of the universe.
Well, David, if the Vesda are being characterized as the root of evilness or just being described as the thing that influenced our concept of evil, and she is the opposite of that, as described as being light and hope, well, that would mean that she influenced the stories of angelic divinity.
Divinity, yes.
Right? Is that what you got from it?
That's what I got from it, because like it was very similar to like,
I mean, the beholder, the way it was lit.
yes,
It was clearly being dressed as angelic.
or
I wouldn't say godlike. Definitely divine. Yes.
Divine.
Yes.
And like when you compare it also with the Vesda, which I have to say, I love the outfit or the way the Vesda wore the armor, I guess you could say. I thought that was really dope.
Yeah, it's really good art direction and costuming.
Yeah, the art direction in Star Trek is alive and well.
Yeah.
Because there's no
complaints there.
There's no complaints
whatsoever.
And like when you take that into note, basically comparing the Vesda and how they're designed, and comparing the Beholder, you have to be blind not to see the implications.
Yeah. Okay, so David, this brings up a very valid question, and I'm sure we're going to face some pushback. I haven't had a chance to check my inbox yet. I have spent most of this season talking about evil and how it's something that doesn't necessarily fit in Star Trek. Even though this episode seemingly posited the Vesda as evil, I have a better way, or I have a way of interpreting it to where it still fits in what we've been talking about.
Okay.
And I do feel like it's intentional, because you just got to listen to the exposition. If you listen to how they're describing things, it's clear that these people aren't evil, okay? And what I mean by that is that they are the primordial force. Let me backtrack. Let me start over. I want to make sure this is clear, because this might get confusing to some.
Okay.
Because it confuses me. The Vesda embody an ancient, almost metaphysical evil, raising the possibility of evil as a primordial force rather than an act. That's how they were fleshed out and characterized. They are a primordial force that has then influenced the concept of evil. It doesn't mean they are an act of evil. The Beholder then functions as the counterweight, right?
Yes.
An embodiment of love and light, introducing a cosmic dualism. So Battelle's hybridization, carrying traits from the Gorn, I believe the Illyrians.
The Illyrians and the Chimera.
Yes. it positions her as an embodied memory of resistance, I believe is how they described it, suggesting that survival itself encodes adaptation to the act of evil. I feel like they were describing something as simply an influence. And it's much like if I were to design a gun, okay? And I would just say, well, this is a gun. I'm going to put this down here. All right, I made it. Well, what's it for? I don't know yet. And then someone picks it up and says, oh, you can shoot someone with this. And they die.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I'm evil or the gun's evil. It means the act of using this gun to shoot someone is evil. So
Yes.
you can look at the Vesda in a similar way. They influenced evil. They might have been characterized as evil because of their actions. But are they evil?
They're more characterized by their not just their actions, but the cause of their actions.
Right.
The result of their actions.
Yeah.
They're not, because especially when you look at the episode where they're introduced, and they're introduced as this entities or beings that are imprisoned because essentially they're more chaotic than anything could handle. So in essence, it took the power of something of higher being, mainly we find out it's the beholder, and to control the chaos that is the Vesda. And it goes into the idea that they're only characterized by evil because, well, the beholder was that more powerful to imprison them.
It almost makes it like a cosmological necessity.
Yeah, much like how they portrayed the Gorn.
Yes, they're a cosmological necessity born of dualism, which apparently, which I've been saying this for years, Star Trek is built on duality.
Oh, absolutely.
It absolutely is built on a type of dualism. So bear with me here, David. If the Vesda are these primordial beings that basically invented the idea of evil, like the first demons, let's say, then the beholder and the ones who lock them away are their opposite, almost angelic figures tied to light and hope. And if that's true, then what we're seeing isn't just a cultural misunderstanding, which is how Trek usually handles evil, but a much deeper mythic struggle. And if Trek is going there, it's tapping to something closer to Zoroastrian duality, the sense of, or I should say, the sense that good and evil are ancient, co-equal forces. And in that way, the show roots its use, or its usual Apollonian and Dionysian tension, in a type of first cause, meaning chaos forces order into being and light emerges only because darkness came first, or vice versa.
Yes.
It's almost like one must exist for the other to also exist. That's duality.
Yes.
So is this evil, or is this a cosmological necessity that then was used to influence and describe what people then deemed actions evil?
As scary as it sounds, for the layman out there,
Does that make sense?
it does.
Okay.
But it even makes more sense when you put it into this layman terms, okay? Because I just thought about this.
Mm-hmm.
What we're essentially saying, and this is going to be blasphemy. I warn our audience right now, it's blasphemy.
No. Is it going to be blasphemous to me as well?
No. I don't think it will, because you're going to probably get a kick out of this.
Okay.
The sense of duality of good and evil being portrayed here. In easier terms, think Star Wars.
Okay.
The light side, dark side. Neither one can actually exist without the other.
Yeah.
That is what's here in Star Trek. They're taking a concept that was, for layman's, it's easy to understand because it's Star Wars.
Yeah.
And then here, we're throwing in deep philosophical roots to explain the argument of essentially good and evil cannot exist without one other or the other. You can't just simply have all good
or the perceived actions that can be described as good
and evil.
and evil.
Exactly.
And or evil.
And when you look at Star Trek has always played around with this.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
if you a clear example is the Power Race and the Bajoran Prophets.
Yep.
They're two sides of an opposing force. One, quote unquote, represents evil. The other represents what? A order. I'm going to say order.
And there you go with the Apollonian and Dionysian again.
Dionysian again. And then, like, it's interesting to me that basically this particular episode, they tackle something that Star Trek kind of tiptoes around, but here we dive headlong into the argument and basically say, no, this is what essentially Star Trek's philosophical roots are at. And it's interesting to me that basically the question now becomes, okay, if the Beholder and the Vesda are the beginning origins of the thought of light and dark or good and evil, whatever you want to say, what came before them? Because remember, in the past episode, they mentioned that there was something before even them.
I'm wondering if the Beholder and the
Vesda?
No, the Beholder and whatever unknown species, super species, or super beings these are, I'm wondering if these possibly, in the minds of the writers, I'm sure we're not going to find out for a long time, if at all, are possibly the people who created the technology that then was used to seed all organic life in the galaxy.
Yeah.
Because you remember at the end of Star Trek Discovery, it was not who we had all thought it was, all the way going back to the TNG era.
Mm-hmm.
It was then reframed to say, okay, these people they used the technology to seed all life in the galaxy, but they're not the ones who created the technology.
Yes.
And it was left open with the big old question mark, well, who were they then? No one had the answer. Not even I forgot the name of the species now.
Oh my God, what were they called?
I have to look it up. Hold on a second, because that's ridiculous. I can't remember. But when you're trying to keep track of so many different fictional alien species that seeded life in Star Trek, I don't know why I forgot. Are they called the progenitors?
The progenitor.
That's right.
Started with a P.
Yeah, the progenitors. That's right. So we found out that the progenitors were not even the ones who created that technology. So perhaps if we're going with this metaphor, or not even metaphor, the implication that possibly the Beholder and these unknown beings are the original creatures that influenced the concept or created the concept of divinity or the divine, then it would not make sense if they actually did create the technology that ended up being used to create life?
Yes. And that's that.
This is the tightrope, David, that you must walk when you are a writer of Star Trek. And
yes.
I love that these writers are not just, certainly there are certain things they disregard, and like certain nuance, like little things, messing with canon a bit. I do call a little shenanigans on this relationship that Kirk and Pike have, when it was, I believe it was pretty clear in the original series that they didn't really know a lot about each other. But I'm willing to shrug and say, okay, you know what? There's some liberty there there's some wiggle room. You can take some liberties there. But when it comes to the big stuff, the stuff that really, really matters, the concepts, the binding themes and philosophical concepts that keep Star Trek woven together so tightly for 60 years, they do right by that.
Yeah. Because
I can't complain about even Star Trek Discovery. They did right by the themes and the things that make Star Trek. They still adhere to them.
Yes. And that's ultimately, to me, after covering Star Trek on this show for so long, you can tell when bad Star Trek happens. Because they
Section 31.
I didn't want to bring up its name.
Picard season 1.
I didn't want to bring up that either. But when you deviate from the tenets the tenets of Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, its core purpose and its core soul. That's when it's bad Star Trek.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to break. To me, you're trying to reinvent the wheel, essentially.
Yeah.
And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The wheel is already good. You don't have to reinvent Star Trek. Star Trek's already good. You have the base principles there that you can do great stories.
Yeah, you have the blueprint. The wheel has been invented, and that's why Star Trek functions so well when you compare it, David. And I know we're probably a broken record at this point, but when you compare this IP, even though there's valid complaints to be made, right?
Yes.
Everyone, I do feel like this isn't perfect. Nothing is perfect.
No.
But when you compare this IP to the many other IPs that are being turned into complete abominations, they don't even reflect what they're supposed to be. We can't say that about new Star Trek. You may not be all about some of the so-called woke things and Discovery, but at its core, it does not deviate from what Star Trek ultimately is about. The wheel was invented by Roddenberry, and thankfully, everybody who has, for the most part, who has taken or played their hand at Star Trek has adhered. They didn't try to turn the wheel into a triangle.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You can tell when specifically certain projects, when the creators of said projects have decided, let's go against Roddenberry's teachings.
Yeah.
And it flounders because you're not being Star Trek at that point. You're just being a cheesy sci-fi ripoff of Star Trek.
Yeah, and there aren't... When people claim that you're breaking Roddenberry's rule, they did it during Deep Space Nine. They even did it during portions of Next Generation.
Yeah.
Let that sink in for a moment. I forgot my train of thought, David. Well, geez, wow.
We were talking about basically how people have went against Roddenberry's original tenets. The original.
I don't remember what I was saying.
The original concept of Star Trek based around Roddenberry's ideals. I would say this.
There you go. Just take over because I totally forgot what I was saying.
When people bring up how they broke Roddenberry's rules, I look back at it now and I see DS9 and TNG never really broke his rules. They just bent them. They knew where to bend it so it doesn't break still.
Yeah, and the same thing could be said about Discovery.
Oh,
They almost bent it to the point where it did break at points, but oftentimes with Star Trek, and you can say the same thing about Enterprise and Deep Space Nine, all of it pretty much, you have to be patient because there may be a moment where you sigh, I'm like, oh, why did you do that? And then by the end of the show or the season, suddenly things start to make sense. You're like, oh, it's kind of like what they did with the Gorn and softening them.
Yeah.
And to the point where like, oh, they went through 3 different layers of evil till we finally realize, oh, wait a second, they're not evil at all.
They're a necessity. They're a universal necessity.
Yeah. So even though they may play, because you have to fuck with us a bit.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there won't be a TV show, especially for fans that have been watching Star Trek for countless years. If you don't try to bend a little bit and then later justify and repair, then you're going to have a very boring Star Trek that's incredibly predictable.
And Mike, particularly this season, that's one of the points that I actually wrote on here is one of the things that really has surprised me because it's something that just dawned on me after the finale, watching it a second time and actually thinking about like how this season all formed up.
Mm-hmm.
The way the Gorn have been characterized now, I honestly think the way that they made the Gorn is far better than what happened to the Borg. People have compared the Borg to the Gorn the Gorn to the Borg.
Do you mean from Picard season 2? Was it 2?
2.
Yeah. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Like, or Picard season 3, what they turned the Borg into by the end, where it was just a queen and
that
you
yeah,
can turn everyone into a Borg
when you can
through
turn it
transporting them, which is pretty cool. But I
It's
like that
cool.
you're laughing because it is a little silly when you say it out loud,
silly,
but it is a cool
exactly.
concept.
But like when the fact that they took a species like the Gorn, who is just as dangerous and horrific and scary as the Borg, and yet they took the Gorn and made them even more epic.
Yeah.
That's how I wish that what would have happened to the Borg. But unfortunately,
You mean in later shows?
in later shows,
yeah.
because the Borg just ended up when you actually sum up the Borg, it's like, oh, it's just a single entity that's a queen.
Yeah.
And-
I agree with that, David, 100%. But I will say we should give credit to this era of Star Trek because I feel like every time we've seen the Borg, yes, they fleshed them out a bit, but it was more about helping us understand what we already knew a little better. Whereas with this new era of Star Trek, even in with the ending of the new Borg, how they changed them.
Yeah.
With what was her name? Agatha or Agnes?
Agnes.
Where she became the future queen, like a futuristic queen. Or wait, what
And
was
they
it? No,
disappeared into the
yeah.
side of
That's
the
right.
galaxy.
Yeah, thank you for believing. Yeah, they fly off.
Thank you for believing. See, when we talk about it, it doesn't sound right.
You're right. But I do appreciate that they didn't just regurgitate. They attempted to do something drastically different with the Borg collective. Drastically different. Even in how they used a different version of the Borg, even though that might sound a little hacky. We have this version, now we have this version. They still tried to make them different. They were dying. They weren't really the collective that we all knew. They were desperate. They had to find new ways to assimilate in order to survive. At least they're doing something new. And that's what you can say, and that's what you're essentially saying with the Gorn here. They took something that wasn't necessarily created by them, but they didn't just regurgitate and retell us what we already knew or even flesh out things that we might have known already but made it more clear. They took it in a completely different direction that didn't actually undermine what they previously had done in the original series.
Yeah. The way that
in terms of how the Gorn operate, yes, there are some there might be some canon issues there just because of the arena episode, but I also feel like this season they obviously went to great lengths to kind of soften those potential inconsistencies by making that direct prequel episode.
Yes.
So I guess what I'm trying to say, because we're pretty much done here, is I appreciate I don't think enough people say this about the producers of current Star Trek. I appreciate their effort. And they may not be perfect at times, but you do when you watch a season and you watch an episode like this specifically, David, the series or the season finale. It's hard to argue that they don't care. Like so many people say, oh, they don't care. They're trying to break it on purpose. It's an FU to Gene Roddenberry. I'm like, yeah, because that's their agenda. That's on their bucket list.
That's on their bucket list.
I want to
personally butt fuck.
Yeah, I want to make Gene Roddenberry roll over in his grave before I die. Like there isn't this malintent that so many people try to subscribe or describe, I should say, how these producers act. I feel like an episode like this is a clear example that they do care. They may not always get it right, but there is a lot of effort going in to make these episodes feel authentic, sincere, and fun at the same time. Let's not forget the fun. I know sometimes people may listen to this show. I'm like, these guys are not into fun at all. They want seriousness all the time.
Wait till we get to the puppets.
Oh, God. The show, first and foremost, is smart. That's what Star Trek has always been. It's smart, it's philosophical, and it's fun. Yeah. And I feel like Strange New Worlds is playing in those multiple sandboxes. I do feel like moving into the next season, season 4, it would feel probably better overall if they create some type of genre consistency or sandbox consistency, just because it does feel at times like a wacky roller coaster because of the vastly different sandboxes from episode to episode this season.
It almost feels like an episode of the month type thing
Yeah.
sometimes because like you get to the point where while I enjoy the wackiness of certain episodes, you know,
Oh, yeah.
like I enjoyed the musical episode. The musical episode was actually fun.
Well, because it was also filled with heart.
And
like,
heart.
It was actually a smart episode.
And like when you take that into thought with the series as a whole, this particular season may not be the strongest, but I appreciate the fact that there is craftsmanship going on in every single episode.
Yes.
And while there's craftsmanship, there's also philosophical thought that's really brought into. However, I will say that with Strange New Worlds, you need to actually give the writers some time to breathe. Let them work.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people immediately jump a gun when they see a particular episode, and I noticed that this particular season, like everyone would jump a gun after a particular episode, like Wedding Day Blues. Everyone jumped like, oh my God, what is Star Trek doing? Yada yada yada, without actually stopping and saying, hey, let them work. They're trying to set up some character development here for us. And yes, this has been one of the core issues me and you have had with Strange New Worlds is their episode count. But that's what we have to expect with a short episode count now. You have to give the writers time. They'll get there.
Yeah.
The writers will know what they're doing, so they'll do something in one episode and probably step away from it for another episode, but just expect that basically they will come back
Yeah.
to that particular thing.
And I will say, David, just now that we now have 3 seasons as evidence, I don't feel like we need to be afraid for like season 4 and season 5. I think it's safe to say that we're on solid ground. Obviously, nothing's going to be perfect, but I know every year we're like, well, hopefully next season will be good as well. I don't really feel that moving into season 4. I feel confident that it's going to be just fine. As long as we keep the same writing room and producers, not much is going to change.
That's the thing. There's a stability with Star Trek right now,
Yeah.
and it is Strange New Worlds.
They found their groove.
Discovery was great, in my opinion. Looking back in hindsight,
It just took them longer to find their groove.
it took longer to find their groove because they were trying to actually try to do something different.
Yeah.
Something that was the thing. Now, Strange New Worlds, they'll try to do something different, but the thing that I think is a really interesting balancing act that they're doing is they're trying to do something different, but they do not forget about where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So if something particularly happens to a character that is a quote unquote legacy character, they make sure that it works for that character. It's not just plopped right in and saying, oh no, that we're just doing that to, you know,
As fan service.
Yeah. Right? No, there's actual legit thought and care why certain things happen so that it can explain further things.
Yeah, they're trying to properly connect the dots.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I appreciate these writers. Even though I get mad and I make jokes at times, I am appreciative of this writing room. They are writing great Star Trek. And that's why, David, I'm going to have 2 separate grades for the season finale. Okay? I'm going to have a Star Trek grade and then a critic grade.
Okay.
Because I don't want my thoughts to be misconstrued as negative. So as I said many times as well in this episode, there's a difference between great Star Trek and great television, as well as great Star Trek and great movies.
Yes.
Star Trek V is an example of that.
The god of Shakari.
This episode is a Star Trek 98 for me. But a television 89.
Interesting.
And overall, the season is a Star Trek 89 and a television 78.
Okay.
Do you get all that?
Yeah, because
Okay.
now I'm actually figuring out my scores, because I had just 2 scores, one for the season, one for this episode. But now that you bring it up, I'm going to go with you on this. For me,
You
Star
gonna do
Trek
two
wise,
separate grades
yeah,
as well? Okay, good.
Star Trek wise, this episode, after watching it a second time, Mike, it's pretty damn close to 100 for me.
A Star Trek 100?
A Star Trek 100.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to be nice and just say 99, so you don't throw your monitor at me. So
I
Star
would
Trek
be
99.
okay with you giving a 100% Star Trek.
Just because of what the implications that philosophically it did.
Yeah. It's
When I really think about it.
It's expert level
It's
Star
expert
Trek.
level.
It really is.
Hey, and television wise, it's not a perfect episode, because format wise, I would actually give it an 89, because that was my initial score.
Yeah.
Overall was, well, I'm going to score it as a television show.
That's what I did too.
89.
It kept coming back to me as an 88, 89. I'm like, but that's not how it makes me feel though. Critically, if I was being objective, yes, as an 89. But I'm
Yeah.
like, but this is a great piece of Star Trek.
It is.
And that's why I came up with the idea of of 2 scores
Now-
to cheat the system.
Now, season wise, season 3 is not as good as season 1 and season 2.
Yeah.
I would give season 3 a television score. This is my television score. I'm going to stick with my original score, which is a 88. However, now my Star Trek score is a bit higher
For the season.
for the season, because when I think about it, all the stuff they did that was like super fun. I mean, I love season 1 and season 2. Their story arcs. I love what they did with the characters. The introduction of Kirk.
Yeah, so
Pike's
good.
story is so good during those times. And then you have the story of Una, which was so compelling going through a rewatch. Here, we just have so many fun freaking moments Star Trek wise. I'm like going, Star Trek fans should be happy with this season, because I'm going to give this a 95 as a Star Trek, as a Trekkie, because I cannot deny that basically, while the genre jumping was very jarring at times, and it led to the one thing that I've always was hearkening as we were covering this season is like, please stop going up and down with your momentum. Keep it steady, keep it stabilized, but they just keep going up and down with the episodes.
Yeah.
So, but just like any roller coaster ride, it is still fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my highlights had to be the episodes done by Davey Perez. I'm sorry. Star Trek needs to go in that scary route. Please bring back those Vesda.
Yeah. I think it's different, or introduce new horror elements. I mean, you're dealing with space. Space can be horrific.
Space can be horrific. I know in the past I've always said never overuse your villains, your villain races, like what they did with the Borg, like what they did in Voyager with a lot of their, villains.
Mm-hmm.
I want more Gorn, Mike. The Gorn are just freaking dope.
Yeah. Dude, it's there's even some stuff that we didn't even talk about, like the meta aspect. So when you're dealing with this whole cause and effect, or how they're using it, effect then cause,
Yes.
it actually justifies many of the things that I've been talking about that could be perceived as predestiny, because the very nature of a prequel, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are things from a non-diegetic standpoint, meaning real world, that must happen. So if they must happen, Pike must have an accident in order to make room for Kirk, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay. What we're watching then, this is why destiny is so important to this particular show, because that's what they're operating within that arena.
Yes.
So the finale plays with the audience's knowledge of Pike's future, weaving his destiny into a story where uncertainty becomes the strength. But Trek constantly reminds us that its history is alive in every new story.
Yeah.
So the weight of past series and characters presses forward, then shaping meaning in the present. So what's striking is how the episode flips expectations. Not knowing what comes next, rather than being terrifying, is portrayed as a gift.
Yes.
And then they're playing with the effect and cause, as if, okay, so the first iteration of the original series is the effect of the cause, which is Strange New Worlds. Do you see what they're doing? This isn't an accident.
Oh yeah. Well, look what these
These
what
are
do they-
things. These are thoughts that these writers are having to justify certain things. These aren't happy accidents. I've analyzed television, David, for 15 years. This is intentional.
Think about this, Mike. The in this episode, the idea of the beholder is what actually shows us what the Star Trek writers are thinking.
The beholder is a lot like us. The audience is the beholder.
Yes.
Time flows reverse, forward, and it was always meant to be.
Yes.
Because dude, I could write a 20-page essay on this. It's amazing, dude.
It's really
dealing
good.
with the philosophy of time and cause and effect, or causation versus correlation.
That's why I said it's Trekkie wise. Trekkie should have absolute fun with the
It's
season.
exceptional. It's exceptional. Now, I will say a couple negatives, and then we'll wrap up. The biggest flaw of this season, David, besides the jumping between genres in an ADD type fashion, is because we have a short season, 10 episodes. You have no choice as a writer but to forget certain characters.
Yes.
And even though La'an had a lot to do in the first 2 seasons, she was kind of background.
She
this
was
season.
background, dude. And it's sad because she's one of my favorite new characters.
Yeah, and Una as well.
Una was
She-
never around.
She was kind of gone.
She was busy having, I guess, fun with her Vulcan boyfriend.
So that's my negative, and that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the writers or the writing itself. It has to do with the nature of the studios currently and their idea of what they're willing to budget.
Yeah.
And
At the end of the day, yeah.
And these are the problems that happen when you're dealing with Star Trek. Star Trek is, for the most part, I wouldn't say it's always been on an ensemble type of show, but it does rely on a supporting cast. And it's hard to get into those supporting characters when you only have 10 episodes. It's the reason why Ortegas was all but forgotten or left to just be the face of the Enterprise as the pilot or the navigator.
Yeah.
So those are the cons, I guess, of the season. And I don't know if I could blame the writers necessarily. It's just the nature of the television business currently.
Oh, I 100% agree with you there.
All right. Well, David, what a great season overall for Star Trek fans. And I am looking forward to season 4, not the puppet episode. Please, please.
I want an Anson Mount puppet.
Well, I might buy some merch if they sell a La'an puppet. I control you now.
I control you now.
That's so deviant. All right. You know what? Let's close out the show. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Live long and prosper.